Good morning, everybody. Everybody got so quiet so quickly. I've never seen this large of a group of people that are so excited to look at graphs at 9 in the morning. This is awesome. Y'all are truly our people. This is awesome. First and foremost, I'm going to be saying this a ton, but let me just get it out of the way. Just thank you all for being here. My name is Dominique McKoy, for those who I haven't got a chance to meet. I'm the executive director of To&Through, and I am so excited to welcome you all to the To&Through Summit. It's going to be a great day. To kick things off, here we go, I was looking around. We're going to talk about everything that we're going to do today, but first I'd like to welcome the Dean of our home here at the Crown Family School of here we go, right here, Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Dean Deb Gorman-Smith is going to welcome us into this space.
Good morning, everyone. As you just heard, I'm Deborah Gorman-Smith. I am really proud to be the Dean of the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. And I am really thrilled to welcome you all here today to this important summit. You are important partners in our work, and I thank you all for spending time with us on this beautiful fall day. I also want to thank Dom and the To&Through team, the team at the Consortium on School Research, today's speakers, and our many partners who devote their energies, talents, expertise in driving this important work. To all of the educators, community partners, leaders who are here, I want to thank you for the work that you do every single day. This work is not easy, and through your creativity and innovations, we know that we're building a space that supports college aspirations of students. Today, as you all know, you will hear from CPS alum who will describe their educational journeys to and through college. And with your commitment and creativity, we are reimagining, testing, developing strategies that will build more equitable learning environments so all students can achieve their highest potential. When I look up at these banners and I think about the history and the mission of the Crown Family School, it is clear to me that the work of To&Through embodies the unique vision of our founders. Our founders were committed to addressing society's most pressing challenges: housing, poverty, crime and public policy, child and family welfare, and from the very beginning, educational equity. And importantly, they were committed to the idea of first-rate research and believed that science and evidence should inform our policy and practice. They maintained that education didn't just happen within the classroom, but also in the community. And most of all, they insisted that the research and training done here should have direct impact on the health and well-being of our communities and society. So I hope that this summit will reveal meaningful and powerful research, provide opportunities for all of you to make new connections and share resources to inform and expand your work. I'm confident that your work will continue to improve the lives of more students and in turn will greatly improve our communities. So once again, thank you all for making the time to be here today. And I look forward to spending part of the day with you. So thank you.
Okay. Great. I'm gonna, again, I told you, I'm gonna start with a lot of gratitude. But first, before we get started, I wanna send a shout out to just the amazing support staff here at the Crown Family School, including Carmela, Sid, Alex, Carrie, Rob, Russell, Reggie, Lynn, and Linda, and everybody else. Please clap it up for all those folks. You may not see them today. Sid is in the back. Carrie's here. We're borrowing her office today. But this honestly would not be possible. Any of the work that we do at UEI, at To&Through, and Crown would not be possible without them. So just thank you all for the support. I'd also like to thank our funders and supporters who make our work at To&Through possible. In particular, I would like to thank Crown Family Philanthropies, the Square One Foundation, and the anonymous gifts that directly supported today's event, and some of the new research and data tools that are going to be coming out and we're going to be sharing with you all today. And finally, I want to thank you all again, right? This is a powerful room. Look around. We got a lot of friends. I saw a lot of hugs, a lot of folks reconnecting. That was the goal. We really tried to work hard to make sure that this was a representation of some of the best minds that are focused on the success of CPS students in this city, and I think we did a pretty good job. There is an incredible amount of talent, wisdom, passion for the success of young people in the city of Chicago in this room. Today we have representation from our amazing CPS elementary schools and high schools. We have counselors, educators, school leaders. We have teams from across central office and network offices, representatives from our nonprofit system, higher education partners, community-based organizations, philanthropic partners, research partners. We got CPS parents in the building. If you're a CPS parent, raise your hand. Clap it up. We got CPS alumni in the building. If you're a CPS alum, you see a hand in the air. I thought about doing like this high school shout out thing, but then like all the Kenwood people, start doing what they do. Whitney Young folks start yelling at each other, so we're just gonna skip all that. We're moving on. There's also a bunch of just amazing people that I couldn't figure out how to fit into one of those categories, but you're here. We thank you for being here, and we're really excited. But to sum it up, you all are here because you play a critical role in our system. And the one common denominator that we all have in this room today is that we care deeply about the success of CPS students. In one way or another, we all spend a considerable amount of time, energy, resources towards improving this system that we're a part of, and trying to make sure that it fully sees the brilliance of our students, and that it is one that can help make sure all of our students have what they need to follow their dreams. So it's a shared mission, right? And we are excited to celebrate that today. At To&Through, the way that we've contributed to that mission over the years has continually evolved, but today, it looks like striving to help educators, leaders, you all, right, use data for what we call inquiry and impact. And at To&Through, we organize our work kind of around three core ideas, right? One, when it comes to changing complex systems and dismantling systems of inequity that have been in existence for decades, centuries, right? You can't change what you can't see, right? So we work really hard to organize and collect both quantitative and qualitative data that can help us better inform our understanding of CPS students' experiences and outcomes, right? From the middle grades all the way through college. Two, we believe deeply that all parts of our system deserve and need access to high quality information that is accessible. So we do our best to work alongside you all, right? To provide resources like our To&Through Milestones tool and learning cases, trainings around how to apply research and data to our practice, and professional learning communities like our Middle Grades Network. Shout out Middle Grades Network. That all can help us figure out how we can use data to ask deeper questions, develop insights, and thought partner around how we can continue to improve our support of CPS students on their journeys. And finally, we organize our work around the idea that, quite frankly, there is no one organization, institution, community, leader in this city that is going to figure this out on their own, right? And so we work to use the data to organize opportunities like today for collaboration, for communication across our system so that we can continue to learn about what works, celebrate it when we see it, but also align each of these independent efforts around the collective work that we know remains. So, that's what we're trying to do today. That's what we're trying to do today, y'all. We're gonna focus on that work. I know some of y'all thought it's like an easy Friday. You're gonna get out a little early, right? You know, it's sunny outside. No, we're here, y'all. We got stuff to do. So, we're really trying to take this idea of data for inquiry and impact and apply it to the way we're structuring today. So I'm gonna just give us a quick overview. We are gonna start with the data. We're gonna have an opportunity here in a moment to take a look at what is it meant for us as a city to be able to track CPS student attainment deeply in the way that we have for the last 10 years and get an update on the 10th annual Educational Attainment of Chicago Public School Students report that we are publishing today in collaboration with our partners at the UChicago Consortium of School Research. To continue our plenary, we are going to have the opportunity to hear about our student stories and the qualitative data that we are releasing today, and get an opportunity to hear from an amazing speaker, Marvyn, who's here to share his story. And we're going to close with a conversation I'm really excited about. We get to be joined by our colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Todd-Breland, for a conversation to help us put this data into context. All right, it's going to stay there. We're going to take a break after that to process. It's going to be a lot. Well, maybe we won't, actually. We were getting a little late, so we'll figure it out. But from there, we're going to be moving into our inquiry breakouts, which have been designed to really share some new resources and research and tools from the To&Through Project. And we'll be leading some sessions that are aiming to help you all make meaning of this morning's data, provide some opportunities to think about how we can hopefully apply some of that data to our work. Lunch will be served for you to pick up, and we will head to our impact discussions, where we and some of our partners from the consortium and the CPS Office of School Counseling and Advising will be sharing some of our work that's in progress, with the goal of leveraging some of the collective wisdom that's in this room, trying to gather some of your feedback to help us figure out how we want to move forward. And while I was making all those jokes about it being a work day, it is, but it is also, it's our birthday, y'all. So this is the 10th edition of the PAI report, we call it for short, but it's also the 10th year of To&Through. And so we wanted to take a moment to celebrate that, celebrate the opportunity that we've had to just work in partnership with you all, and spend some of that time to build community with each other, right? There will be cake, and we may even have a birthday gift for you all or two, but you have to stay and find out, so who knows? But we are really excited to just have the opportunity to celebrate how far we've been. Finally, it's going to be a great day, but I think in order to really try to make the most of the day, we have a couple asks or kind of charges that we wanted to pose to all of us in the room. And so there's three things that we are asking that folks can try to keep in their mind as they engage with everything that we have planned today. So one, we are going to be sharing a lot of numbers. We're going to be sharing a lot of narratives today. Fair warning, it is going to be a lot, but again, y'all showed up, so you know what it is. You're ready. So we need to ask that you do your best to find your work in the data, right? Find where you feel like you can make the most difference. Find the communities that you care most about in the data. Find the young people that you support in the data. Whatever it is that you do your best to find your work. Two, again, we are uniquely blessed to have so much talent in the room today. So please do your best to meet somebody new. Today is that day. If you have seen somebody in these spaces, if you have heard about a cool project, you heard something exciting that was happening at a school, tell that person if they're here, right? Let them know. exchange information, find a way to collaborate, find a way to connect. Do your best to find somebody new. And three, as confident and like clearly as excited as I am today, I'm gonna just temper our expectations. We may not solve everything today, okay? We may not solve anything, and that is okay, all right? You may not have that kind of like light bulb moment, but if you do, let us know, because there'll be a feedback survey, so put it in there. But again, we are just all in unique positions to help achieve this collective mission of having our system be one that truly sees our young people and provides them with that information, that support, and the resources that they need to navigate their college pathways with agency and dignity, right? And so, our last charge for you all as you work with the data today is just try to find a next step. Doesn't have to be, the thing that fixes everything, but find a next step. Find something that you can take an action on today. That may just be exploring one of the resources further, or exploring something on the tool. Might be finding an insight that you want to incorporate into a current project, or something you want to share with your colleagues, right? Maybe that coffee that we talked about earlier, setting it up with somebody, right? Doesn't matter what it is, but let's try to work to find a next step. Cool? You with me? All right, fantastic. It's going to be an amazing day, so who's ready to look at some graphs? Yeah, there it is. That's that energy we need. Okay, it's super excited to invite my colleague, Jenny Nagaoka, here to the stage, who's going to walk us through this year's report.
Oh yeah, get your... Hey, good morning, everybody. I know, now I feel like I'm the one in between you and all the data, but I have been charged with, been charged with taking you through the history of To&Through because, it's our birthday, and I think we should take some time to reflect and think about, where we are, where we've been. So starting out, about 10 years ago, almost to the day, some of you were in a room for the first To&Through convening. So, it's a lot has changed since then. I mean, I looked at that picture, it looks like it's like this Harry Potter room, and it looks like a lot longer ago than it actually was, but 10 years ago, but that's a really long time. And so much has happened during that time, and I think, and again, I just want to kind of echo Dom, note about how amazing it is to be in the room with you. I mean, there's that energy today, 10 years ago, and there's that energy today. Just seeing the different parts of our education community in one place, I think it just gives me so much hope about, where things can go, and a chance for all of us to celebrate everything that we've accomplished. So I'm going to go back 20 years ago, because the consortium started a body of research looking at the transition from high school to college, and this was our first report. And it was the first time that numbers on the district and on schools for college enrollment and college completion were out there. And that was really important, but also really hard. We had been working closely with the district on the consortium side under Melissa Roderick's leadership, and on the district side, Greg Darnader's leadership. And it was this true partnership that was really grounded there, but still, nonetheless, when this report came out, it was truly eye-opening, but it was also tear-producing because nobody had seen that data before. And then I think a lot of you are familiar with this headline, and so this is kind of the predecessor of the post-secondary what we call today the post-secondary attainment index. And it was saying that we were predicting that only 6 out of 9th graders in 2006 would complete college within 10 years. And this was. It was both it was a galvanizing moment because people saw how important it was. I mean, this really spurred a lot of people to action. There's a lot of college access nonprofits which in some ways see their origin story in this graph and that work. One Goal, Collegiate Scholars, among others. And I think the other thing that we really learned from this is, one, the data is powerful. and important, and it matters to be sharing these kinds of numbers. But I think we also realized how damaging it can be, right? Because, this was being used, I think, for the reporter to shame and blame CPS, but I think in a lot of ways who felt it the most were students and families, and I think that's a charge that the consortium and To&Through has taken really seriously over time. Because we believe in data, but we also want it to be used as a positive force that really spurs people to positive action. And so, the consortium continued to do research, and I was a part of it, and I think one thing, so I raised my hand as a CPS alumni, and we were doing the interviews for the Potholes report, I think, and so that was like almost 20 years ago. One of the things that really struck me is that how little had changed at that moment from when I was in high school. And part of the reason why I do this work is because I really, I'm a graduate of Lane Tech, and it really bothered me a lot about how little support the brightest students in the city were getting for going to college. That's like my why for a lot of this work. And I was really troubled by that. So that was like 20 years ago. And so we were doing research and understanding that more. And I think another thing that was like a part of this story is the role that data plays. Like the consortium does research, but we also realized how important it was to be providing data at the district level and the school level so that people inside schools could really understand what that research meant to them, what they could do going forward. And so, the consortium put out research reports. We've also partnered a lot with our partners within UEI at UChicago Impact. And so that's been a big part of the story as well. And then there's our friends at the Network for College Success who sort of, I think this is also an important part of the story, and part of the To&Through story, is that it's not enough to just put out, reports, provide data. There needs to be people working with the people inside of schools to understand data, to make that research more real. And then there's this power of networks and practitioners to really enact change. So kind of like moving to, so I think so flash forward another 10 years, and for like 10 years ago, and 10 years from the very beginning of the story, the first PI report came out. And like underneath that was just part of like why, I think the first triggered headlines had sort of scarred me, but I'm like, look how much has happened in 10 years. We should take that number back and use it to celebrate and change the narrative about what's happening inside of CPS, because so much had happened, and it was really important things that happening that people were not recognizing. And I also kind of, if you'll indulge me a little bit, the other thing that I've been really happy about is it's given me the opportunity to go back and look like, so what were we doing when we first started To&Through? And there's like this first advisory group, and we set out like 3 goals in 2013. So we said we want to support school improvement efforts by providing schools with good data to organize efforts to support their students' success. We want to expand our work to elementary schools and facilitate opportunities for CBOs and others to partner with schools to broaden the audience for school-level data to external partners and their stakeholders. So that's what we set out to do 10 years ago, right? But then, okay, so let's see what happened in the next 10 years, right? So 1 year after that first report, Alex Seeskin was the new executive director of To&Through, who's here, came in from North Carolina to join us. And so we released another update from that first report on the PAI, and it was the launch of the To&Through online tool, which was looking at high schools and through 5 milestones. We kept on going. We did that report every single year for 10 years. I don't even know how we did that, but anyway, every year for 10 years. We continued doing that. We released 10 research reports in partnership with the consortium. I say we, I'm part of the consortium too, but we like the number 10 apparently, I kind of realized. And then in 2019, we extended our work to the middle grades and started a middle grades network really inspired by and leaning on the expertise of our friends at the Network for College Success. And then just, the other thing I think that really struck us, especially during the pandemic, about how, quantitative data is not enough. We really need to be hearing from students and practitioners and the people doing this work, sharing their stories to really start to make meaning of what's happening and to be using that to expand the work. So, that's a lot. I mean, we met those goals and surpassed it. I mean, looking back, I am just like amazed at all this that was accomplished under the leadership of Alex. But I have to say, like the other thing that really excites me now, I mean, today, it's our birthday, as Dom noted, but it's also sort of this, the starting of a new era under Dom's leadership. And I am truly excited to see what comes next, and I think when you go to the sessions later on today, you'll get a taste of what that's going to look like. And I think you'll be at least as excited as I am right now. Okay, so now now it's the data part of the story. So, I've kind of provided you sort of this history of it. But, I think, being to and through, what also matters is how it is measuring this and showing it. And the way that we have done this over time, in a lot of ways, has been around the post-secondary attainment index. And so what it does is it gives us kind of this big picture view, given how things are today, the rates that we have, how are the different parts of the system contributing to how Chicago Public Schools students are doing around education attainment? And so I think that's something that's really matters, and that's something that we really have paid a lot of attention to over time. So today, if current rates hold, we are expecting that 31% of today's ninth graders will complete college approximately 10 years from now. So that's, a lot better than 6%. But I think it also tells us, there's a lot of room to grow as well. And where that 31% comes from is we start out with 100, and Alex Usher will be shortly sharing with you a little bit more about the details here. So if we take 100 ninth graders today, given the current high school graduation rate, we would expect that 85 of them will graduate from high school. 57 of them will go on to a two-year college or a four-year college. So that's 14 going to a two-year, 43 going to a four-year college. And then 31 would complete college. And so with 7 completing at a two-year college and 24 completing a bachelor's degree. So I think what's also kind of really interesting is to look at this over time, right? So we're at 31% now. In 2012, we were at my eyes are at 21%. And so when we first started the work of To and Through, and we were at 21%. I have these vivid memories of talking to people 20% is a lot better than it was, but this is a really hard number to move because it's capturing different elements. High school graduation, so things have to be going right in high schools. It's about the supports going on to college. We need to be relying on higher ed to be supporting it. So I'm this is an important thing to look at, but I don't know if it's going to change. Don't be upset if it doesn't change that much over time. I have never been happier to be so wrong about a number, right? I mean, because so much has changed. And I also kind of want to mention too, it's not like everything was smooth sailing during that time. I mean, there were teachers' strikes, there's so many different administrations, there was a pandemic, there's so much that was going on. But, this change, I mean, it's just a number, but I think it also, this is something that all of you have been a part of, right? And that the fact that all of you are here to be, reflecting on this, but all of this is the work of everyone in this room from all different parts of the city and all across different sectors. So it's something so this is you. The other way that I've also I've never been happier to be wrong about is what actually happens. So we talk about the PI as being a prediction. So if you go back to 2012, we thought that 21% of students would complete college within 10 years. We were really, really wrong, because actually if you took that class, those ninth grade students who were ninth graders in 2012, 27.3% of them actually completed college. So that is about 1,600 students more than we thought who have a college certificate or a college degree. And so So I'm looking at that 30.6%. I hope we are at least as wrong, 10 years from now. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex Usher.
Thanks, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. So usually I feel like doing the data slides is kind of like a tough sell, but I know this is a room of people that signed up to look at data on a Friday, so I'm very excited to get to take you through some of the nitty-gritty of the report. Just off the bat, there's a few different ways that you can interact with this data. As Jenny showed, some beautiful photos of our PDF covers of our old reports. For 10 years, we've been putting out, well, for 9 years, we've been putting out these, beautifully designed, printed PDFs that we realize very few people are reading. So we transitioned last year to the report being a website. Check it out on our To&Through website. It's under Data Tools. Scroll down to the bottom and you can click on it. You can interact with different pieces of the report. You can look at disaggregations of the data and really dive into the parts that are most interesting to you. A couple other things to call out on our To&Through tool. As of this morning, huge shout out to city colleges. They have led the way in making their data the first data that's public on our new higher ed version of the tool. Thank you, city colleges. We know there's a big election coming up. And so we have data on the tool now organized by elected school board districts. So you can look at outcomes for students in different board districts. The other thing that Jenny mentioned, we are releasing a batch of student stories today. Huge shout out to the whole team that worked on that. That's another way that we think it's really important to engage with this data and to understand the other side of, numbers tell us one piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. It's really important to understand those student experiences. So encourage you all to dive into those student stories. All right, let's get into, I'm gonna walk us through each of those key components, those key milestones that go into the PAI. First off is high school graduation. Off the bat, this is at a record high. Yeah, can we get a round of applause for the highest ever high school graduation rate that we have reported, which is now at 85%. And I think this is just a great example of what can happen, right? Like this is a steady, slow and steady positive growth. This graph is going back to 2008, but basically back as far as you want to go. It's been kind of a slow and steady uptick in the high school graduation rate that's led us to 85% today. So that's really exciting. Next, we are going to look at college enrollment. If I walk, can you all hear me if I just yell? No? Okay.
That you can do.
Is this on?
Turn it on. Turn it on. That would.
Good?
Give it a second. Now. Now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sid. College enrollment. One thing I want to talk about here before we jump into the data is that we probably, like anyone else in this room who looks at college enrollment, we get our data from the National Student Clearinghouse, and we know that the way they match students with their enrollment records, they have a matching algorithm. It looks at students' names and birthdays. It's not perfect. Sometimes kids get missed in there. There's FERPA blocks. There's, not 100% of colleges report. So this is the best data we have. It's not perfect. Our partners at CPS have access to more complete data than we always do. But what's important is that the trends look the same. Our numbers are very close. But if you all see slightly different numbers from different organizations, we are aware of that. It's not a mistake. There's just, we calculate things slightly differently. But the main story and the trends are the same. Okay, so jumping in. We have another record high here, y'all. This is the highest immediate 4-year enrollment. So students immediately enrolling after high school, that first fall, enrolling into a 4-year college is the highest it's been. It's at about 48% for, I know these are small, people in the back probably can't see. 10 years ago it was at 38%, it's up to 48%. So that's really exciting. Almost half of students are making an immediate transition into a 4-year college. There's another group, about 16% making an immediate transition into a 2-year college. That number has fluctuated a bit over the years, but that kind of tracks with a national trend that we're seeing in 2-year enrollment. So CPS is sort of following that trend. The other thing I want to call out here is, I'm pretty sure nobody but me can see these, but the number of students going into this graph has gone up a ton over the years. As we have seen, enrollment in CPS has gone down a little bit. The number of students enrolling in college has actually gone up. So for this class here in 2023, we've got about 22,600 students who enrolled into college. And that's actually more than back in 2010. Even though there are fewer students in the district, that's about 2,000 more students enrolling into college. So we've got more kids, we're putting more kids into the pipeline, and more kids are enrolling every year. So that's really exciting. All right, college completion. So the way we look at this in the report is we break it down by what students' first transition was. So this first graph is looking at those students that we just saw, those students who made transition immediately into a four-year school. About half of them are completing a four-year degree within 6 years. And another handful, about 4%, are completing a two-year degree. Again, I want to call out those ends because we're putting more students into college, but we're also graduating more students every year. And that's something I'm going to come back to in a minute. The next one is looking at students who immediately enroll into a two-year college. About a third of those students are completing a degree or certificate in 10 years. And I want to call out, you can see a really big bump right here in 2015 when the STAR Scholarship started. Another shout out to city colleges. Big bump in that year. And then lastly, these are students who do not make an immediate transition to college. They enroll at some point, but they didn't go that first fall. And this number is low and has been low. And I think what this tells us is that we see in the data that the most likely path to a degree for CPS students is to immediately make a transition to college. And that has remained the story. Okay, this we are very excited for this year to be able to give some national context to the numbers and to really call out that CPS is a national leader in this work. And you all are national leaders in this work. There's a lot of numbers on here, so I'll take it one by one. High school graduation. The best national rate comparison we've got is about 87% nationally. We're at 85. Amazing, but when you look at, we know here in CPS we serve mostly Black and Hispanic students. So the national rate of high school graduation for Black students is 81%, CPS is 82. Hispanic students 83% nationally, CPS is 85. So yes, round of applause. So that's really exciting. Immediate enrollment into a four-year college nationally is 45%. CPS is at 48, as we saw. And then two-year enrollment, 17 nationally, 16 for CPS. So we are truly keeping pace with the rest of the nation. The last one on here is bachelor's degree completion, which nationally is 69%, CPS is at 50%. But when you do break that down for different student groups, Black students nationally are at 43%, CPS 35. Hispanic students nationally are at 50%, CPS 51. So while I think it's awesome that we're keeping pace with those national trends, it also tells us that the country as a whole is not serving Black and brown students well in college. So this is really a call to action, I think, that amazing that we're sort of like keeping pace, but we're keeping pace with a number that needs to increase. Okay, one more thing I want to do is look at this data for different groups of students. We've been looking at high-level numbers for the district, which is really important to understand what those trends look like. But we want to think about different groups of students, and this is another place that I really encourage you to check out the website, dig into the report. Like Dom said this morning, find the students and the communities that you care most about and look at what the data is looking like for those groups. One more thing before we jump in. This is a quotation from our To&Through team equity stance that I would really encourage anyone who's interested to find on our website, give it a read. It's really some values and things that we feel very strongly about. One thing when we look at disaggregated data is that we want to be very clear that the differences we're seeing here are not about the abilities or the aspirations of students, of families, of communities. We want to look at data for these different groups because we know that opportunities and resources and support is not equitably distributed across the city. And so these outcomes are the result of structural barriers, of systemic racism, of historical context. And so it's important to look at them. It can be hard to look at them, but we really want to, as Jenny said, use this as motivation to make positive changes and not to blame. Okay, so this first disaggregation is, this is the PAI, so that high level 31% number. You'll see at the top in that gray bar for all students. This is breaking down what that PAI rate is for students from different race, ethnicity, and gender groups. So 2 things I want to call out here is that for every group, young women are outperforming young men. So within each race ethnicity group, young women have higher rates than young men on this PAI. The other thing is that we see a pretty big difference for our Black and Latinx students, who we know make up the bulk of the district, compared to their white and Asian peers. There are some gaps. The green is students who complete a 2-year degree. There are some gaps there. There are much bigger gaps when you look at the blue, which is students who complete a 4-year degree. And again, we know this is not due to the aspirations of students across the board. Across all of these groups, about 2/3 of students are telling us in surveys that they aspire to a college degree. So this is really the result of who has access to success in the post-secondary system. And I think that's another rallying point for us all today, and another place that we can really dig in and hopefully make some change. The other thing, as Jenny said, this number is not destiny. This is not, fate for these students. This can change, and we hope it will change, and we want to help it change. Okay, 2 more priority groups. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I do want to call out that in the report, we know 2 priority groups for the district are students who are learning English and students with IEPs. This I just pulled as an example. This is college enrollment broken down. The way we look at students who are learning English comes from our colleagues at the consortium. We organize it by students who are active English learners, students who were English learners but have moved out of support, so they're former English learners, and then students who were never English learners. And there's some really exciting trends here with former English learners having very high rates of success. The other one I want to call out, you all can dive into a little bit more on the report, is students with an IEP. And then very lastly, I want to get into the rest of the exciting day, but one more graph. So this is, we've been talking a lot about rates, percentages, high-level stuff. This graph is number of students. So we know that behind all these rates and all these percentages are real students. That's why we're all here today. We care about the individual students who are in these numbers. So this graph is looking at how many students enrolled into college in each of these graduating years. That's what the number at the top of the bar that probably no one can see will tell you. For the classes that enough time has elapsed and we have the data, the colors within the bar show you what happened to those students that enrolled in school. So students in the dark green completed a bachelor's, students in the light green completed an associate's or a certificate, and students in the gray did not complete anything. So a couple important things here. There are more and more students every year enrolling in college. We're up to consistently about 14,000 students in the past years enrolling into college. So 14,000 students are telling us, we don't, at To&Through, we don't think college is the only path or it's the best path for everyone, but there are 14,000 students a year putting their hopes and dreams and their family's finances and their plans into college. And so how can we make sure that they're able to be successful? Because there are more students, this green portion is getting bigger every year. There are more students every year completing degrees, but that dark gray is also getting bigger. There are more students starting college and not completing degrees. So this is where I really want to end on a call to action here to figure out what we can do as a system to change these numbers. And I think an important piece of that is understanding the context behind these. Data is only one piece of the puzzle. It brings up questions. It doesn't always provide answers. It's really important, we feel, to understand the stories and the student experiences that are leading to these numbers. So that is where I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jessica, to bring us to the student stories.
Good morning, everyone. Hello again. My name is Jessica Guadalupe Vargas. I also want to do a mic check. Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, cool. I'll do that then. So, my name is Jessica Guadalupe Vargas. I am the engagement analyst for the To&Through Project, and I currently lead the Student Stories series. Thank you. I'm also a very proud CPS alumni. I graduated. I graduated from my neighborhood schools on the southeast side, and growing up, my school community, especially my teachers and counselors, really encouraged me to discover the power of student voice. They helped me see that being young and a student were not weaknesses nor justifications for me to disregard my ideas and see that adults are as flawless, ultimate experts, that in fact being young and a student were my strengths and the exact reasons why me and my classmates needed to speak up. At first, speaking up started in the classroom. I still remember being like a shy little freshman sitting in the back, too scared to raise my hand because I was scared of saying something dumb. So I, little by little, tried because my teachers created welcoming environments where mistakes were embraced. Then I started to get involved in after-school programs like After School Matters. I was just really eager to get involved in after-school programs because I honestly didn't want to go home. My home wasn't always comfortable, so I tried to stay outside of my house as long as possible. So that's sort of why I joined the Student Voice Committee, and not gonna lie, they had snacks, and it was a hot commodity at the time. And there, my amazing instructors, Ms. Robbins, Mr. Davis, and Ms. Rohde, along with like the amazing other mentors at Washington, introduced me to what student voice is, and then connected me to MCFA Challenge. Woohoo, MCFA. Yes. At MCFA, I had the coolest Latina facilitator, Sarah Martinez, who taught me about the power of student voice in action. That student voice in action was doing a soapbox about something that I cared about in downtown Chicago. It was organizing a demonstration when my classmates and I felt that the adults in the building were wrong. It was serving on my local school council. So by the time senior year came, I lived and breathed student voice, and I'm forever grateful for those experiences and my mentors for their cariño and support. It's really thanks to them and those experiences that it's made me to continue my work in student voice with To&Through. I believe and breathe about the brilliance and expertise that young people have in our education system, because at the end of the day, there is no CEO, no board of education, no school staff without students. They're the thank you. They are the foundation of our education system and the ultimate experts by experience. Their ideas, opinions, and dreams for education systems should be at the center when we're building our future of our educational structures. So that's why I love leading student stories. I'll go to this slide. Student stories are real stories from real students. Each story is a summary of an in-depth interview with the CPS alumni talking about their educational career. And just like our data on the To&Through milestone tool, these stories are also critical data that we can use to better understand CPS alumni's experiences so that we can better inform our work. There are 3 values that I center the project in, and they are, number 1, embrace complexities. Students, at the end of the day, are not just students. There are young people whose experiences and identities are so dynamic that quantitative data by itself will never fully capture. The focus is to humanize our young people and recognize there are more than just a data point. And we start by embracing any and all the complexities of students' experiences and identities. Number 2, honoring the triumphs and the struggles that students have gone through and recognizing the resources, systems, and people behind them. The goal here is to provide firsthand perspective on the resources, the systematic supports, or lack thereof, and the efforts of the amazing educators and mentors who've supported them in the face of systematic barriers, limiting their post-secondary success. And number three, my favorite, elevating their voice. In each article, we end with 2 sections, what worked for the students and their aspiration for the field. And this value is entirely dedicated to amplifying their pushes and recommendations for our educational institutions. Currently, we have a growing library of student stories centering the voices of CPS students who identify as students of color, immigrants, first-generation college, or from low-income backgrounds. And I'm proud to announce that today, in honor of the 10-year anniversary of the Post-Educational Attainment Index Report and To&Through's birthday, We published 10 new student stories. It was not easy, so I have to give a big thank you to Francisca and Peyton for the support, and JJ, who's not here, for their support in making that happen. You guys are the most amazing teammates. On the back of the agenda postcard, there's a QR code that you can scan to explore the library of stories. You can also visit our display case located on the west side of the building, where you can preview some of the quotes of this year's student stories, and scan the QR code located on the corner of the posters to hear the quote directly from the student themselves. Another shout out to Peyton for that audio idea. It's pretty cool, y'all. I tried it. It works. Also, if you're interested in learning more about student stories, you should come join our student story panel with Deshauna Johnson and Elijah Wright Jefferson. And now, I'm excited to continue to celebrate student voice and storytelling with our guest speaker, Marvyn Estrada, who participated in this year's Student Story Series and who is here today to share his story with us. So Marvyn, when you're ready. Let's give it one more time for Marvyn.
Good morning. My name is, Good morning. My name is Marvyn Estrada, and I'm excited to join you all today to share my story. To start off, I'd like to talk a bit about my high school experience. I attended George Washington High School in the Southeast Side for all 4 years, one of them being fully virtual. On my first day of freshman year, I walked into school and instantly felt like I belonged. My school is majority Latin, so in each period of the school day, I was constantly around other students who looked like me. At school, I felt at home. But then there was a big change that came in March of 2020. Majority of you, I was told, weren't high schoolers during the pandemic. So I'd like to invite you all to imagine with me right now. Could you imagine how different your high school career would have been if your entire sophomore year of high school was just erased? If you had to spend the entirety of your school days that year at home in your room, no sports or clubs or lunch with friends or potentially reconnecting with that classmate you were just starting to become friends with. Sounds a bit weird, right? One day in freshman seminar, we heard an announcement that we would be out of school for 2 weeks because of COVID. And before I knew it, the rest of my freshman year and the entirety of my sophomore year were all fully virtual. During that time, I felt fortunate because I honestly did not feel the big academic and social slump like many of my peers felt throughout the virtual year in school. I established many of my closest friends early on in my freshman year, so during quarantine, I had friends to talk to and did very well academically. But still, online high school was definitely odd sometimes. I took an argumentative literature class that required me to discuss with other classmates what we were reading about. Since we were on a video call, we had to go into separate, smaller video calls with our groups for discussions. These breakout discussions were silent. No one would ever actually talk. At most, we just had a couple messages in the chat. I started freshman year in person, but I didn't walk inside my school again until I was a junior. And transitioning back to in-person classes was very interesting. For the majority of the time in my virtual classes, no one ever turned their cameras on or microphones, including myself. So the only way I remembered people were through their profile pictures on Google Meets. I can recall going up to people saying like, "Oh, you had that anime profile picture, right?" And sometimes they would remember my profile picture too. It was definitely a unique experience, but for the most part, I returned to school and things felt almost back to normal. The transition back came with a couple funny moments. While I wasn't in a classroom, I felt I was still able to cultivate a few good student-teacher relationships. However, it was funny going back to school and having a teacher you spent an entire virtual academic year with not recognize you because you had your camera off. The transition back also came with some challenges. One of my interesting experiences in CPS was feeling the teacher shortage in real time. For my entire senior year of high school, I had no math teacher, and all the coursework was online. This class essentially became a study hall period, so my friends and I would spend it goofing around in class or in other teachers' rooms. Looking back, although it was sad to not have a math teacher, I felt fortunate that I had other teachers that I could go to during that period. I developed meaningful relationships with my teachers that will forever be important to me. My favorite teacher in high school was my band teacher. She was my teacher for both my junior and senior year. She trusted me and my friends and us to hang out in the band room during our math class. This trust made me feel respected as a young adult and showed me that she really cared about me outside her classroom. It's thanks to her and the other teachers at Washington that left a profound impact on me as a student and inspired me to become a future educator. I was always the type of student who liked to have conversations with my teachers, whether they were related to education or not. My physics teacher and band teacher were prime examples of this. During my lunch period senior year, I would constantly go to my physics teacher's classroom during his free period. He was sort of popular. There was always a good handful of seniors who would eat lunch there as well. My teacher and I would spend a lot of time just talking about things we were interested in, such as pop culture or a variety of other things. I also had similar conversations with my band teacher as well. I would also ask them questions about education. I wanted to hear real stories from teachers about what led them to their decision to teach and how their teaching experience was going. It was in these one-on-one personal conversations with my teachers that inspired me to pursue education. Even though I knew early on I wanted to go to college, by the time my senior year started, I was unsure where to enroll. My dream was to attend Illinois State University for their robust teaching education programs, but money was a huge barrier. My mom was very anti-loan at the time, as she didn't want me going into debt for college. She thought it would be a great idea if I was a commuter student and went to a college within the city like my sister. Thinking about that idea, I got flashbacks to the super early mornings and late nights my sister would do day after day. I saw how much of a struggle it was for her to commute to school every morning, and doing that didn't seem appealing to me. I wanted some of the college experience I heard about at school. Thankfully, due to my high school and institutional scholarships and aid, I was able to attend ISU without needing to take out any loans. This was all very exciting to me as I was able to attend the university I felt could best prepare me for my educator goals. After walking across stage and getting my diploma, I was excited to start school at ISU. Now for some context, as a CPS student who has been in Chicago my entire life, the transition to ISU was a bigger challenge than I expected it to be. During my first semester at ISU, I realized I had taken for granted how connected I felt to my Latino heritage and community back at my high school and in my city. ISU is a predominantly white institution, which means I'm not surrounded by students who look like me anymore. This was an experience in my life that made me feel imposter syndrome and feelings of doubt within myself of whether I truly belong at my school. Leaving Washington was tough, but leaving home was an adjustment as well. As to be frank, my mom was my alarm clock for school. Having to be much more independent in nearly every aspect of my life was a bit of a hard shift for me. This led to some struggles my first year, such as missing class, falling behind in schoolwork, and socially isolating myself. I had trouble managing my new schedule, as well as feeling academically unprepared for some of my courses in school. In high school, I felt I didn't challenge myself academically. I took general courses with a few AP and dual credit, but I feel like taking more college prep courses like IB would have benefited me. The harsh adjustment to all this new independence, struggling in my coursework, and social isolation took a toll on my mental health. However, it hasn't all been a struggle. My university has been a great support with their mental health and student health resources. Being enrolled at my university has given me access to a student health insurance plan, better than my parents' plan, which has allowed me to see a therapist for when I need extra support. I'm also very appreciative to have a pretty good support system at school as well, such as my wonderful girlfriend who goes to school at Illinois Wesleyan 10 minutes away from me. My friends at my university, such as my roommate, and my friends back home. I've also been successful in connecting more with other students by joining various clubs and organizations. Now in my sophomore year, I've gained a greater sense of independence since starting university. While there have been challenging times that I'm sure are yet to be over, I'm eager to continue pursuing my education to become a great teacher one day. Now I'd like to share with you some of my aspirations for the field of education. As an alumni who attended CPS and a student currently pursuing a degree in special education, there have been many things I enjoyed about my experience in CPS, in the CPS system and higher education. There are, however, challenging systemic issues that could be improved upon. As an aspiring educator looking to enter a high-demand field, there have been some hurdles that have unfortunately made it difficult for me to enter the field as soon as possible. When I entered college, I originally started as a Spanish education major, but recently I've decided to switch to special ed. This switch, although exciting because it aligns with my passions, has not been easy. Even though I am a sophomore, switching education programs now is considered late, so I would have to spend an extra year in college if I want to pursue this field. Also, because I'm still going through the process of transitioning majors, I don't get priority when enrolling for the required special education courses. So I potentially may not be able to take the classes I need for my major next semester, as I'm considered a low priority over other major declared students. On top of this, every course is a prerequisite to the other, which means I can't do multiple classes in my major at once to catch up, leading to even more lost time and frustration. The current major structure is just way too restrictive. It offers no grace for young people who want to become teachers but are inspired to pursue a different education program than they originally thought. In a time where we need as many new and well-prepared educators as possible, switching education programs shouldn't be this hard. Finding your teaching passion should be supported, not challenged. It's early roadblocks like this that could be deterrents for other students that want to become an educator. One of the other biggest challenges I've noticed as a Latino first-generation college and low-income student is the social transition to college. During my first year, I personally went through a point of isolation and loneliness, which took time to break out of. The social transition is a big struggle for many students. Especially as first years, most students feel a sense of loneliness while in school, and I feel universities aren't doing enough to help combat this. Universities should prioritize promoting their student engagement opportunities, not only at the beginning of the semester, but consistently throughout the academic year, especially during the winter semesters when seasonal depression is on the rise. As a future educator, I have many dreams for myself and my future students. I had many influential and amazing teachers during my time in CPS. One of my goals that I always have in mind is that if I can leave as much of an impact on my future students as my teachers left on me, then I will know I am succeeding as a teacher for my kids. I want to be a role model for my students and support them as a student and as a growing young person. I want to be able to provide support and guidance if they need it. As a first-generation and low-income Latino student, I'm also eager to offer the bilingual support needed in my Latino students, families, and broader community. I hope that by sharing my experience and expertise, you all as education leaders can better support future first-generation low-income students of color. I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
We got principals in the building. Who's hiring? Right? Like, thank you, Marvin. Everybody. Right. Thank you. So I feel like I should apologize to our next speaker because I set us up. Like I planned this and I didn't think that through. Like we got to follow Marvin. I'm sorry. Just thank you all again. We're really excited to close out our plenary and have a guest who I'm really excited to bring up to help us try to take everything that we've been talking about for about the last hour and try to put it in some context. Dr. Elizabeth Todd-Breland is here with us today. She asked me not to read the long bio, but I'm a big believer in making sure people stand in their shine, so we're going to do a good chunk. We made some change, but for those of you that don't know, Dr. Elizabeth Todd-Breland is an associate professor of history at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and her research and teaching focuses on U.S. urban history, African American history, and the history of education. Her work also explores interdisciplinary issues related to racial and economic inequality, education, urban policy, neighborhood transformation, and civic engagement. Her book, it's a fantastic book, Political Education, Black Politics, and Education Reform in Chicago since the 1960s, analyzes transformations, black politics, shifts in the modes of education organizing, and the racial politics of educational reform from the 60s to the present. Since 2019, Dr. Elizabeth Todd-Breland has served on the Chicago Board of Education, most recently serving as the vice president. Her board service is just one of many examples of her dedication to CPS students. She is a CPS parent. She has served on local school councils. She has worked with high school students in our city as a high school social studies instructor and as a college counselor. Dr. Todd-Breland's writings and commentary also appear in journals, edited volumes, popular media, and as a frequent public speaker, Dr. Todd-Breland also organizes professional development workshops for educators and develops curricula on African American history, urban education, and racial justice. She earned her PhD from the University of Chicago. And she is back here to join us today. I'm so excited for this conversation. So Dr. Todd-Breland, please come up to the stage. A little long, it wasn't that long. Welcome.
Hi.
Oh,
Hello.
there we go.
Hi.
Excited to have a conversation about kids?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I want one more round for Marvyn, though,
Yes.
because, again, a setup, okay? Thank you, Marvyn.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
We're really excited to have you here. We got a whole bunch that we can talk about, but I've been really excited to get to know you better through this process. And I think one thing that stood out to me, just a commonality in both of our bios, is that before we kind of got to this research space, we spent time working with students. And so I would love for you just to share a little bit more about your experience of working with CPS students, and in particular, too, just how has that informed your work as a researcher and as you've continued to be an educator in college?
Thank you so much. So it is really interesting to be here today. I wrote a large part of my dissertation in the basement of this building, not because I went to the school, but my friends did, and there's no windows, so you could just grind. The University of Chicago is a special place.
It's a windowless building.
Yes, I was actually a history student. I got my PhD in history on the other side of the Midway. But like many graduate students, and I think I can talk about this now without them coming to get my little stipend checks, because you're not supposed to have multiple jobs. I had many hustles and many jobs while I was a graduate student. And so between 2004-ish and 2010, I worked in an after-school program at Kenwood. I was a high school college counselor in the Collegiate Scholars Program here at the University of Chicago. In fact, I think I worked with one of their first sort of classes that were going to college, and we piloted this curriculum called College Countdown. And we did a boot camp in the summer with students. I did this for several summers, students from all over the city of Chicago, high school juniors going into their senior year, helping them to get ready for college, think about college, what's best fit, write your essays, how do you ask your teacher for a letter of recommendation, all these kind of things. I worked for UEI writing 6 to 16 curriculum, if anyone remembers that. I was a social studies instructor, and then a high school college counselor at the UCW, the Woodlawn campus of the charter school. And one of the things I was thinking about as we were looking, you find yourself in the data. I could find myself in the data because I taught ninth graders in 2006, right? That first year we were looking at, and I was the senior counselor for the graduating class there in 2010. And it was their first graduating class. And I remember the sort of tenor of the time around what graduation was about. And it was very driven, particularly in the charter sector, it was very 100% graduation, 100% graduation, right? And how one got there, less focused perhaps on that part of it. But I think it speaks to the broader education policy environment of the time, which stressed competition, it stressed making sure that you're hitting particular metrics, kind of regardless of what it takes to get there or whether or not there are supports there. And I think I felt that as an educator in the building, as a counselor for sure. But the other thing I remember, more than any of that, is my students, of course, right, who I still see. Hey, Ms. Todd. You know what I mean? And their experiences and their trials and their challenges and their triumphs that have led them to many different places, some of whom are no longer with us, some of whom are incarcerated, some of whom have their PhD, because I'm older now, so they are too. So I think just thinking about that wide range of things, it was, I think all of that shapes my interpretation of some of the data that you were sharing here today.
Love that. It makes me think a lot about, as when you can kind of take some of that experience and some of that context of working with students and trying to figure out, I think how it can inform our kind of way moving forward. What are some of the things that stuck with you about that time that you really liked, that really worked? And what were some of the things that you kind of have seen evolve and kind of want to continue to see evolve?
Yeah, I think in terms of things that worked, I mean, I think it was at a time when I think we were talking more about looking at data, right? And that felt important to at least understand what is actually happening, how we build on that, how we move from that. That was something I feel like I learned through practice. I think there were ways in which there was seen the value in partnerships. Partnerships beyond just your institution, your school, looking at community-based organizations, thinking about other entities, and there, as was noted earlier, I think at that point too, a growing set of nonprofits, foundations, organizations that were growing, coming online at that point, to particularly focus on college readiness. And so I think that felt like something that felt promising, and it felt like there was a lot of energy there, right? And I think that's some of what we see in the trajectory that we see here is the importance of all of that. I will say I was a Learn, Plan, Succeed detractor when it first came on, because I was like, another barrier for these children. But I have come around. I've come around to being planful, okay? To being intentional. I saw someone with a Learn, Plan, Succeed shirt. There you are, I see it. Today, right? So I think that there are things that, were growth areas for me as well.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about some of this data. I want to see what you see. I want to hear about what you see. When we spoke earlier, and I might pull it up here in a minute, but as Alex, our colleague Alex shared, we try to be hyper conscious at To&Through that the numbers are only a part of the story, right? And that any time that we're putting any data in front of ourselves, that there is a whole bunch of history, context that doesn't make it on the graph. We've talked a lot about this, y'all. We've tried, and sometimes it's just we gotta. There's a reason why we need to look at the numbers sometimes, but it's missing context. And so, would love for you, as we think about those disaggregated PAIs, right? The post-secondary attainment index by race and gender. Again, those are projections. But what is the history behind some of that? I'm actually gonna pull it up too, so folks can kind of see it again. Right?
Oh, yes. So, I think, let me take a few steps back. One of my colleagues at UIC, another education historian, Dion Dans, talks about this as well. But I think often we'll be asked, as people who study the history of public education in Chicago, what was the golden era of Chicago public schools? When were things really going well? And I think that's a hard question to answer. One could have many answers, right? Well, there were a lot of kids, influx of young people in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and expansion of high schools. But for whom? There was an area of great building of institutions in the mid-20th century. Lots of new schools coming out. You'll see a lot of buildings that were built during that period, but they were segregated, separate, and unequal. We can talk about graduation rates over time, but whether and why you need a high school degree changes over time. So if you were not finishing high school but going directly into unionized factory labor that could provide a middle class life for your family forever and a pension, that's a very different proposition than a post-industrial society that's based on a service economy. So I think this question of the purposes of schooling has changed over time, and it's something that we're still grappling with. And I hear us still grappling with it when we talk about college or career, college and career, CTE, or should we push college, and these still, questioning and thinking about these things. I want to say that's not a new question, right? That's a long-standing set of questions that have existed about the purpose of education. The other thing, though, that I want to appreciate you all for it to and through, you know, and looking at the report and going through the website, you foreground, right, that like you can look at these numbers, but understand first that we are sitting on top of, living through, continuing to endure structural racism, systemic inequality, and that's not something over there. That is the basis upon which we're building everything else. And we have not disentangled ourselves from the systems that continue to reproduce inequity. So I appreciate the attention to saying when we look at this data, this isn't about deficit, right? This isn't about something wrong or lack of belief in education in Black and brown communities. Students don't care about school. Students, we heard that, what, 2/3 of students said I want to go to college across areas, right? So I think for me, those are some of the things I think about. And I also think about this because I also study social movements. And I think I find particularly irksome the continued idea that particularly Black and brown communities, low-income people more generally, don't value education. Because in fact, those are the very communities that have had to struggle and continue to struggle over and over again for some of the same things that we talk about today. I'll give an example just here in Chicago. So in 1919, there was a big race riot in Chicago. And by race riot, I mean a young Black teenager was stoned to death in Lake Michigan, and there was white vigilante violence that followed. And at the outcome of this, there was a race relations commission that was put together across the city. And they were like, what can we do so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again? 1919. And they said, we can have affordable housing, we can have high quality public education, we can make sure that people have jobs and access to healthcare. That's 2024 problems, right? So I say this to say, like, I'm a historian, so I very much believe in change over time. I don't believe that history repeats itself, but it certainly rhymes. And the way that these structures have changed is actually important to pay attention to, because if we don't, then we put forward, mid-20th century solutions to a 21st century problem. But the nature of the fact that systemic inequality and structural and institutional racism continue can't be disentangled from the data we're looking at. I think the other thing that sticks out to me, like, one, I want to say it's unacceptable also, right? And that's about our system failures collectively. Again, not about the children, young people, young adults. One of the things, and let me be clear, right? What I'm about to say right now, this is not like causation, it's not even correlation. I'm just observation, hypotheticals. I am curious about the long-term trends and changes relative to gender. And I think one of the things it does make me think about is, again, going back to sort of mid-20th century and the fact that particularly young men did not need college in order to have economic advancement because of the nature of highly paid, unionized labor opportunities, or even not unionized, but the labor movement had created a floor and a robust social safety net that doesn't exist anymore and doesn't exist for young people today. So a shift in why college is necessary, a narrative structure around why college is necessary relative to gender, I think is important, whereas for women, in order to have opportunities for economic advancement, often some type of education was necessary, because the major post-secondary fields, if they were going into post-secondary education, was to go into nursing or to go into being an educator, a teacher. And those were the routes, and it required something beyond high school. So I wonder, it's a wondering, not a, but it's something that I wonder about as we think about gender, and as we think about what are the things today, again, change over time, what are the things today that are reproducing these disparities relative to gender?
I love that. It makes me think about, I recently heard or learned about the acronym of HEAL fields. So instead of kind of the opposite of STEM, health, education, I think administration, and literacy. I think some folks starting to think about, can we start a movement, particularly for young men? We have the jobs, they exist. We need more nurses, teachers, in a variety of different ways. And I think trying to find opportunities to see if we can balance out that representation as well in similar ways that we've tried to do with female representation in STEM fields. So I think it's
And just one thing to add to that, I think another thing that's interesting though about the HEAL fields is that in that they have been areas that have been seen as feminized
Yep.
labor,
Yep.
they also are often not paid as well, have
Yep.
less
Yep.
significant benefits, being able to leave the workforce to have children and families can be quite difficult in these fields, even though women predominate in them.
Yep.
And so I also just generally want us to think carefully about when we say someone is overrepresented. Overrepresented relative to what? Relative to opportunity in other sectors of the economy. So if we, for example, right now, you could look at the principalship in CPS and say, well, Black principals are overrepresented relative to their population. Well, relative to what other similarly situated job opportunities, relative to the fact that education has been one of the main fields in public sector work more generally that Black people could find family sustaining work in. So again, I just want us, I think it's very important for us to think about how to shift these HEAL fields and such, as I think it's important to think about how to shift STEM and these other fields where young women and girls are underrepresented. But I think we have to pay attention to power dynamic in that and who has been historically oppressed and had less opportunities in those spaces as we push those narratives.
I think something else that always stands out to me, right, is that a lot of these gaps in opportunity that exist here, this is nothing new, right? And I think this isn't new news, right, for a lot of us in the room. And I think one thing personally that I think does excite me is I think a more full-throated recognition of, I think particularly the experiences of Black students in our elementary schools, high schools, colleges. And recognizing that it's fundamentally, there's something different happening for our Black students that's not happening for our Black students that may be happening for some other populations. And I think it's interesting, I think it does make me think a lot about, again, going back to this idea of kind of collective action, what is the opportunity for everybody to have a strategy? And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, right, where are you seeing kind of exciting kind of collective movements, right, where you are seeing focused efforts around the experiences of Black students?
Well, he's in the room, so I have to shout him
That's
out.
kind of what I was
Eugene
fishing for.
Robinson,
Yeah.
could you wave your hand? Put your hand up, Eugene.
There he is.
Eugene is the new Director of Black Student Success at Chicago Public Schools. And I will say, being a part of that work over the last several months has been very exciting and has been a space of hopefulness for me. And I say this from a couple perspectives. One, and this is mixed company, but if you know our communities, it is hard to get folks together sometimes. And that happened over the last several months. People who don't always agree with each other, I'm talking about Black folks, people who don't always agree with each other, people who are coming from different spaces and orientations, people who have long histories of disagreement, but share a vision for making that not the reality, right? For supporting young Black people in this city, for supporting Black people generally, because I think that's also part of the frame that became very evident. And I think it's one of the things we struggle with as a society. And it's hard because I'm in education, I believe in education, but often we feel empathy for children that we don't feel for their parents, that we don't feel for their communities more broadly, who we continue to pathologize and say are not deserving for various reasons. And so I think understanding that supporting Black students is about supporting Black families, is about supporting Black communities, it's about supporting neighborhoods, and self-determination feels exciting. And again, as a historian, this ain't the first time, but it's exciting work, and it's been exciting for me to see all the different people who have lined up to say, I'm gonna put some things aside and I wanna be a part of this. And so I'm really grateful for Eugene and Fatima Cook, who's not here, Chief Equity Officer at CPS, and all the many community-based organizations, the parents who participated in that process, the folks on the working group who participated in that process, students who were very present at those meetings. And I think this question comes later, but I'll bring it up now. Student voice is the answer, actually, right? I don't know where Marvyn went. Marvyn just told us all the things, right? And I want us to think about, and I know we're going to talk about data, but which direction is it Marvyn validating the numbers, or is it the numbers validating Marvyn? And so for us to continue to think about the interplay between quantitative research, qualitative research, the importance of student voice and student stories, not just as an add-on, not just as something that makes us feel good, but as driving the work. What happens when we do collaborative research with students, with their families, with educators, with school leaders, with all the people that are part of our educational systems and infrastructure, and what might that produce if we do research in that way?
Love that. I want to go back to Eugene for a minute, because that kind of makes me laugh that we're making a whole chat about Eugene, because we should. But he told me not to do this. But I got the opportunity to join a call, and Eugene's new in this role, doing a ton of work just to let people know that this is happening. I was able to join an online call with Raise Your Hand and just explaining about the role. And I think did a fantastic job just kind of laying out some of the initial priorities, even though it's new. But I think one thing that really stood out to me, right, is that, again, these are folks that are taking time out of their day to join a webinar to talk about CPS kids. They were excited to be there, and I think in a lot of folks' comments, right, understandably, there's just a lack of trust, right? And I think one thing that really stood out to me is just the uphill work, right, that I think we have to really help young people and families, I think, build back trust in institutions that fundamentally just have not worked for them more often than not. And I think a lot about that in college. One thing, when we've made so much progress, I think, in this district, that if you think about it, right, for your average CPS graduate these days, you're more likely than not to have some experience with college, right? So if you have a brother, cousin, uncle, sister, right, who recently graduated before you or is older than you, more likely than not, they have some sort of experience, right? And so I think a lot about, how, like, it is very rational to use that expertise that you have, somebody that cares about you, to understand, what was your experience like? Is this something that I should choose for me? And it goes both ways, right? We have, again, our numbers are showing this. We have a lot of students that maybe they went on their college experience and it didn't work out on their timeline. They're still working on it. They didn't finish. They have debt. There's students that did finish, that didn't have a good experience, didn't feel like they belonged on their campus. And so as you think about kind of building back trust, what are some of the things that you're hoping to see, both in, I think, our K-12 system and in our higher ed system?
No, thank you for that question. First, I want to say that the lack of trust is earned. It's not ephemeral, it's not a perspective, it's not conspiracy. It has been earned over generations. I think honestly, my big takeaways from the data is there's a lot of issues with the and through, right? And as someone whose actual job is in higher ed, I just want to name that. Like, we are not taking up our part of that relay. The baton is dropping, right? The gaps, what leaks in the pipeline, diversions off the pathway, whatever the metaphor is, there's a lot of problems with the and through part. And so I think I want to applaud, like, going from 6 to 31%, you may not be happy with 31%, but I want to clap it up for 31%. Like, that's significant.
And 31% doesn't have to be true.
Correct.
Right? 31% has not happened yet.
That's right. And also, the higher ed numbers, not looking great. What is it? 50% of 40%. Yeah, that nationally 69%, much lower for that for our students.
It's the edge of our work. Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
And so I think that as we think about higher education, and we heard this in what Marvyn told us, and this is also what we see in study after study after study, the cost of college is prohibitive. Yeah. It is prohibitive, and it is increasingly and increasingly more prohibitive for students to attend, and not just, maybe you'll make it the first year, but you're not making it through on the finance side of that. And all of the other things about the necessity of, like, what are those supports? What are those supports for, when you're feeling socially isolated? What are the supports for mental health? What are the, and I can speak to my own campus, we don't have the level of, we are not matching the level of student need, right? That's true for K through 12 as well, right? But on mental health, frankly, on physical health, we are not able, and I'm at a public institution as well, we do not have the financial support or infrastructure to address the nature of student mental health and physical health concerns that they're coming to campus with, and that those problems are not their fault either, right? Those come from all types of systems. And I also want to say, like, I'm so glad that Marvyn narrated what COVID was like as a high school student, because I feel like we've been kind of fast to turn the page. And those effects are not over. They're not going to be over soon. My little one started the pandemic as a 3-year-old, right? Out of daycare, I'm working like this, doing a lecture, like, go sit down. You know, like, those things have real impacts. At the middle grades level, what that looked like. At the middle school level, what that looked like. At the high school, at the college level, what that looked like. And I think we often ask of young people, or we applaud them for their resilience, but we demand it of them in a way that's just not fair. And we don't ask it of ourselves in the same way, and our institutions in the same way, to be attentive to that. So I think I want us to think more about what we've learned from COVID and what we've learned from that experience, and what are the things that we take with us. And it kind of relates, I think, in some ways to some of my thoughts about data, but I'll leave it there for now.
Well, I think let's pick it up, because I think that's where we gotta. I think that's where we gotta go, and I think kind of wrap up. But you know, we've been able to see kind of where we've been, right? And I think we are some of the biggest believers that data is a piece of the puzzle. But I think we also, right, we believe that we've been able to play a role. And as we think about, you know, this moment, you know, I think we have a new way of choosing representatives for our board, right? You know, there's a lot of transition. We have a lot of the lessons that we've learned from here. I'm just curious about some of your thoughts of, you know, what do you see as the role of data and research kind of moving forward, and what do you what do you want to happen, right?
Yeah, I am actually excited about where we are relative to understandings of data and how research can be used as a tool. And I think that one of the ways I sometimes think of it is the difference from being what I would say kind of like a previous generation. Well, when data became like a really important thing in education policy, it was all about being data driven, right? And I think we're in a place now where we're talking about being data informed. And it may seem a subtle difference, but I think it's an important difference, because I think being data driven led us to things like using data to punish, using data for competition, as opposed to sharing data, transparency of data for actual continuous improvement, sharing of data as a way to say help is on the way. And I want to applaud city colleges in particular for their work in sharing this data, because it requires a certain level of vulnerability to say we are doing the best we can, right? Or we're doing what we can right now, and we know we need to do more. And so I think that that's actually I really applaud that. And I think that I would like to see more of higher education, you know, share their data in that way so that we can think about how to move. I mean, I will speak, one of my experiences as a board member that I think was very transformative for me, and in some ways for the district because it changed policy, was being part of the accountability redesign process. That was like a 3-year process. It involved community members, it involved educators, it involved students, and it was coming out of a moment of, I think, a lot of pushback on the harm of summative ratings, the harm of the way that particular data points, often quantitative, were being used to punish. Or the feeling that they were being used to punish, sometimes the actual way that they were being used to do things like close schools or fire people, or turn around. And so I think coming out of that, it was a really interesting conversation. And I think one of the things that was discussed earlier was like changing of culture. Look, we sat in those meetings for like multiple years, and still towards the end of it, We were talking about, well, what does it mean to share data and mean that help is on the way? What does it mean to share data for continuous improvement? And those of us who were in the room working on it were still like, yeah, but how are they going to use? But how will this be? How will I be punished for this? Right? It's such a deeply ingrained way of thinking about data. But I feel like there's an opportunity there. And I want to be clear, this doesn't mean getting rid of high expectations. It doesn't mean, it's a shift in where we think about how to shift data points from being like, here's the bar, get it, here's some things, but figure it out, to if we provide the right conditions, if we properly resource for what's necessary, if we focus on the student experience, the scores will come. And I think that is a fundamental shift, but it's one that I'm excited about. And I think it also highlights the importance of both quantitative and qualitative data. And that, I think, to get back to the point, is one of the things I hope we've learned from the pandemic, that student learning and well-being are intimately connected. Well-being cannot be an afterthought, or learning's not gonna happen. SEL is not an add-on, it has to be deeply intertwined with the things that we're doing. And I want to say in particular, I'm speaking to myself and my colleagues in higher ed who have probably far less than K through 12 learned that lesson in the way that we've kind of gone back to things.
I think the energy's there. Thank you. Before I let you go, we gotta close out, unfortunately. But want to just take a moment. One, thank you for being here. But also, just want to acknowledge, right? You've spent 5 years as a board member for this city. And as we've learned, that if anybody who's been to a board meeting, this is not an insignificant amount of time. It is you all spend a lot of time, volunteer your time on behalf of young people in our system. And so I also know that you don't always hear thank you all the time. Sometimes you do, but today we want to make sure that you get a thank you. So we are believers in giving people their flowers, so we can give you your flowers. Just for all you've done, and just thank you. Thank you for your service to our city. Yeah, please.
Look, I know the elephant in the room, y'all. I'm not, fool. So let me say a few things I can say. What I'll say is this. In my time, my 5.5 years on the Chicago Board of Education, I've served with 16 other board members. I've served under 3 CEOs and 2 mayors. My experience of the board is that transition and change is actually a feature, not a glitch of the system. No one owns these seats. We're appointed, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve. And also, all of this, for all of us, wherever we sit, is a relay race. And I'm proud of the leg I've run, and I am happy to pass the baton to those who are gonna run that next leg, appointed, elected, whatever it is, as we enter this period of democratic governance of Chicago Public Schools. So I am hopeful. I am grateful for the time and the honor it has been to serve. But as Marvyn told us, this is about students, right? The endeavor of education is about students. And what I know is that staff are going to keep up showing up to their schools, their networks, central office. I know that teachers are coming into school every day to teach. Our school leaders are coming in every day to lead. And I'm grateful for them doing that work, because even if we think about how many transitions and changes happened over the course of this time, and the folks in this room, wherever you have been situated, have continued to have a commitment to moving the work forward in wherever it is we sit. And so I think that is why I am hopeful about the continued trajectory of work like this that we're seeing. But most important, I think I am every day levied and buoyed by the brilliance of the young people in this city. Yeah. They are truly brilliant, remarkable young people, and it is all of our responsibilities wherever we sit to continue to pour into them with everything we got.
Appreciate that. Let's end on that note. Please join me.